Hello, my name is Stephen Lunsford. This is my Media Clip final project for the course Educating Exceptional Students. The course is being completed in spring of 2019 and done online. Throughout this PowerPoint, I will go over the different disabilities that we learned about this semester in our text. I will go over the characteristics of them and some universal designs for learning that I would incorporate personally in my classroom to include these students. First is learning disabilities. There truly is no such thing as a typical student with learning disabilities. You cannot tell a student has a learning disability by looking at them. They're all different. These students do commonly have above average or average intelligence. They struggle with certain subject or certain areas of learning, how they process information in those areas. Universal design for learning ideas. Differentiated instruction, I feel, is a big one in this one, but I also feel it's a big one in pretty much all these, and I'll touch on that later. You need to learn, God dang it. Hello, my name is Stephen Lunsford. This is my Media Clip final project for the course Educating Exceptional Students. The course is being completed in spring of 2019 and done online. Throughout this PowerPoint, I will be going over the different disabilities that we learned about this semester in class. I will touch on the characteristics of those disabilities and universal designs for learning that I personally would incorporate to include these students in my general education classroom. First is learning disabilities. There truly is no such thing as a typical student with learning disabilities. You cannot tell by looking at these students they have a learning disability. They commonly have average or above average intelligence. They just struggle in certain areas of learning or certain ways of processing information. Some of these students are brilliant with math and struggle with reading and need a little bit of help there. Universal designs for learning, I would incorporate the biggest one here, and it's a big one in pretty much all these, is differentiated instruction. Very important to learn how these students learn, what makes them tick. If they struggle with math, what can you do to help them out with math? If they struggle with reading, could you offer an audiobook? Just learn how they learn. Another one is advanced organizers. This is another pretty big one in pretty much all these. Examples are webs, maps, and concept diagrams. I like to look at it as where you were, where you are, and where you're going. How does one thing relate to another? How does what you learned relate to what you're learning now, relate to what you're going to learn? Next is communication disorders. These students have difficulty with speech, language, or both. Speech disorders are basically the act of talking, being able to talk. Language disorders entails difficulty receiving, understanding, or formulating ideas. So that one's not how you talk, it is how you get your words and ideas to speech. How do they come out? Universal design for learning augmentative and alternative communication systems. If a student can't talk, there's all kinds of assistive technologies that we learned about. Different apps, push the picture of the bathroom door to let them know you don't need to go to the bathroom, if there's a water fountain, all kinds of stuff out there for that. Very format of delivering information. Again, that's kind of a form of differentiated instruction. Do students learn better verbally? Do they learn better visually? Allow different forms of assignments. If you have a student that has trouble talking, it wouldn't be right to have them do an oral report or a presentation in front of the class. Could they do a written report or a PowerPoint? And again, graphic organizers, important one here. Emotional and behavioral disorders, biggest one here is social problems. I have not been in a classroom setting in a long time. I assume this is one of the more prevalent disorders in schools today and probably one of the most challenging. These students are going to have inappropriate behavior, just be in bad moods, classroom disruption, stuff like that. Universal design for learning, I would incorporate classroom-centered intervention. I feel this is a big one. Incorporate proper behavior ideas into your curriculum in your class. Conflict resolution, pull these students aside when they do have issues, talk to them. What was going through your head? Why did you get so mad? What can we do next time to prevent that? Behavior tracking with the use of technological apps, pretty good one. Everybody has an iPad, iPhone, some form of technology. They can download an app. You can even keep it on a calendar. You get a green check mark on a day you did good. If you had a bad day, you get a red check mark. That's a visual representation to the student of how they've been doing with their behavior. And positive behavior supports positive reinforcement. You never can have too much positive reinforcement with these students. Try to ignore as much of the negative as you can. Of course, if it's too bad, you're going to have to address that. But Ignore as much of the negative and positive reinforcements on all of the good stuff. ADHD, there's two main types of ADHD. There's a predominantly an attentive type. These students have trouble focusing, staying on task, being organized. The hyperactive impulse type, these students have trouble holding still, keeping their hands and feet to themselves, talking out of turn, talking too much. And there's also students that do struggle from both of these types. Universal Design for Learning, there's a bunch of different classroom modifications. If a student with an attentive type has trouble staying organized, if their notebook for this class is on this same shelf every day, that's definitely going to help them stay organized, know where their stuff is at, and stay on task. Goal setting is a very important one here too, especially for the inattentive type. Again, as far as I need to get this done, this is what I need to do to get it done by this day. Break assignments down, big projects into different areas. I need to have this done by this day, then I need to do this part by this day, and this is what I need to do that. Monitoring of medication. A lot of these students will be on medication. We cannot advise on medication. We cannot suggest medication, but we can definitely work with the parents. That's another very important part, to monitor if they are on a medication, how it is working with the student in school. Definitely communication with the parent is important, again, on a lot of these, but this one's pretty important if they're on a medication. Video self-modeling, I would like this in my class if I had a student that's showing some maybe problem behavior for the hyperactive impulse type. Set up a cell phone, iPad, something to record the student during the day and find where they are behaving appropriately. They'll have something to look back at that on, and so they know that that's what proper behavior looks like. Intellectual disabilities. Characteristics here are significant limitations in intellectual functioning, significant limitations in adaptive behavior as expressed in conceptual, social, or practical adaptive skills. Memory is another big one here, and very important one is the ability to transfer knowledge from one environment or task to another. Designs for learning I would use here, probably the biggest one, that second one there, functional curriculum outside the classroom for real world experience. Concepts of time, concepts of money. These students will have trouble carrying what they learn in the classroom to the real world. Definitely get them out in the real world, let them experience this stuff outside of the classroom will definitely help them. Goal setting is another important one here. Peer teaching is one I haven't touched on yet, but that's again going to be important on a lot of these. Anytime you can get a general education student to pair up and help teach one of these students, especially with intellectual disabilities, that's going to boost their confidence, it's going to make them feel better about themselves, and it's going to help really both students in that. I enjoy that part of it. Again, very important in all these disabilities. Autism. Going to be a lot of social issues here. Social communication impairments, social emotional reciprocity, nonverbal communication and maintaining relationships, repetitive behavior and interests, and problem behavior. Another fun one for special education teachers, again, I'm pretty sure. One that the book mentioned in this I really like is mnemonic strategies. This is just different ways to get your students to remember what they're supposed to learn. This word sounds like this word that I'm trying to learn. The word you already know sounds like the word you're trying to learn. Remembering them that way. Promote friendships, again, that peer stuff, also very important. Positive behavior support, again, touched on that earlier. You never can give these students too much positive reinforcement, but the biggest thing with these students is clearly defined appropriate behavior, because a lot of times they're not going to know what appropriate behavior is. You have to let them know, this is not inappropriate, this is appropriate, this is what you're supposed to do. Because if they don't know, they don't know. How are they going to learn? Traumatic brain injury, big range here, and it's based on the severity of the injury and the location of the injury. These students will have trouble paying attention, translating information, memory, brain function, basically, obviously. Universal design for learning ideas here. Again, differentiate instruction. Allow multiple options of how they learn, how they present their information, how they test. Very instructional pacing to allow adequate processing time while monitoring responses. Sometimes these students are going to take longer to learn. Slow yourself down or let them go to a special education room if they have to. I know that's not ideal, but sometimes that is helpful. Problem solving, decision-making instruction. Again, you can incorporate that into your classroom curriculum, your general education curriculum. These students will struggle with that. All right, students with hearing loss. There's two levels of hearing loss. The first is deaf. These students have hearing loss of 70 to 90 decibels or greater and unable to use hearing as a primary means of developing a language. And then hard of hearing. These students have hearing loss in the 20 to 70 decibel range, can benefit from amplification and communicate through language. What that means is students that are hard of hearing can use hearing aids. They can hear enough to understand and learn language. The deaf students, it's generally not the case. Universal design for learning here that obviously is going to be important with these students is sign language. I don't know in my school district how many deaf students there are, but I'm sure it's a good idea for a teacher to learn sign language, at least enough to be able to communicate with them. Lesson planning for hearing impaired students, not necessarily just if you have a student that's hard of hearing or deaf coming in, but to already do that originally when you first do all your lesson plans. Graphic organizers and hands-on experiences, obviously important here too. And provide deaf role models. The textbook touched on this one and I really liked it. Find a deaf adult in the community that the student can pair up with and go do real world experiences, go to the store, learn how they're going to have to go about life being deaf in the real world. I think that's very important. Visual impairments. There's 3 classifications of visual impairments. Low vision, these students can read print. They may need to use a magnifying glass or something. Functionally blind typically uses Braille for reading, but can function in their environment. So they can't see well enough to read. They can see enough to walk through the school or know their way around their house. And then the totally blind do not receive meaningful input through the visual sense at all. Universal design for learning Braille, obviously, is a big one here. Abacus for calculating, very important, something you can feel instead of something you have to see. Assistive technologies such as text-to-speech programs. Again, there's all kinds of assistive technologies we've learned about. Very important with these students to teach them daily living skills in school too. They're going to get a lot of that at home, but if we can do our part to help with that, that would be helpful also. And then I have a few overviews, key points here, ones that I feel are important in basically all of these. Differentiated instruction, again, I touched on that a lot. Learn how the student learns best. Feel your student out. If they don't read as well, provide audiobooks. If they need extra time taking tests, allow that. Appropriate IEPs, it's going to be important in all these, obviously. Make sure the assistive technology, any kind of assistive technology that'll be helpful, make sure they have that. What will help them best, be open, communicate with the parents, definitely important. Assistive technology, again, I've touched on that quite a bit. There's all kinds of stuff out there, from low tech to high tech. We learned a lot of that. Communication with students' family, again, a key factor. Keep up with the students' parents. How are they doing in school? What have they been doing? How have they been acting? Do they have any issues? Is there anything they need to address at home that would help you at school, and vice versa? And I think this is a very important one to me. Support peer relationships. These students, almost all of them, are going to have some social issues. It's very important to communicate to the general education students how to interact with these students, how big of an impact they can have on these students' lives. Definitely let them know that, because these special education students, students with disabilities, just a lot of times a general education student, a normal kid, acknowledging them, giving them the time of day, befriending them, sitting by them at lunch is a huge thing for them, and it can improve their social skills. It can improve their behavior. Just, it goes a long ways with these students. So thank you.